love. You've got a coach who's up in your business, all of your business. You don't make a lot of money, although in Robin's case, the NBA pays a lot better than the NFL, but still, it's not player money. You can't gain 3 pounds. You can't even talk to the attractive, famous young men right next to you. You can't drink bottled water. The more I learned, the more cheerleading sounds like walking through airport security over and over every day. Just the feeling of being heavily policed with a bunch of unexplained, arbitrary rules that are maybe there to keep you safe, but you don't really get why. And just, isn't it supposed to be fun? Is it fun? Robin looks at me kind of pityingly when I ask about this. Is it fun?
I don't know that I can compare anything to kind of being on stage in front of, like, in a stadium under those lights in front of, like, 25,000 screaming fans. It doesn't, even when I think about it now, it doesn't exactly feel like me. It's a little out of body.
In like an awesome way.
In an amazing way. Yeah. In an amazing way.
Robin was part of the most elite professional level of cheerleading. She was dancing with people who were auditioning to go on tour with Madonna. It was Los Angeles. There were celebrities everywhere. Thousands of people came to games. She got to sit courtside next to Denzel Washington. In other words, yes, moron, it was fun. It was really fun. In those moments, the rules and Lisa were not on her mind.
Anna Jaffe-Walt is one of the producers of our program. Coming up, the LA County Sheriff's Department loses an inmate in its own jail system on purpose. That's in a minute. Chicago Public Radio, when our program continues.
You're tuned to Colorado Public Radio News with all the major stories from around the nation, the world, and around Colorado.
Support for Colorado Public Radio comes from Rocky Mountain Cancer Centers, where oncologists are dedicated to offering advanced treatments and clinical trials for colorectal cancer. Learn more at RockyMountainCancerCenters.com.
I'm Chloe Veltman, the arts editor here at Colorado Public Radio. Join me on Fridays at 10:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. for the Colorado Art Report, your home for in-depth news and views about Colorado's rich culture scene, brought to you by CPR's expert team of reporters, commentators and guests. You can also find the Art Report and more of our arts coverage online at cpr.org/arts.
Each week in our program, of course, we choose a theme, bring you different kinds of stories on that theme. Today's program, Mind Your Own Business, a.k.a. Mind Your Own Beeswax, a.k.a. Butt Out, Buzz Off, MYOB. This is an A and B conversation, so see your way out. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye when you do not notice the plank in your own? Don't be dipping in the Kool-Aid when you don't even know the flavor. I'm David with my family. People in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. We arrived at Act 2 of our program. Act 2, Cop versus Cop. Well, there's been a big, messy, fascinating story unfolding in Los Angeles for a while involving two big law enforcement agencies, the LA County Sheriff's Department, which is huge, and the FBI. A secret investigation got exposed. There were accusations and counter-accusations, clandestine recordings. And by the end, a bunch of people's careers were over. But the heart of it was this. Nobody likes to be watched, reported on, judged by some outsider. No person likes it, and no organization likes it. Nancy Updike has the story.
Employee Christmas parties are so often associated with bad behavior and just unwise choices that I believe they rival wedding toasts. About 3 years ago, Robert Federecci, a reporter for the LA Times, heard about a Christmas party thrown by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department.
At this, beautiful banquet hall, there had been a massive fight between deputies.
This fight was not an argument, it was a fist fight among sheriff's deputies. And in Los Angeles County, sheriff's deputies are guards in the county jails, which does not mean that they're watching a few drunks sleep it off in a holding cell. This is the largest jail system in the country, over 19,000 inmates at the moment. So Robert heard about the deputies' brawl at the Christmas party, and he started looking into what had happened. What he heard was that one group of deputies had beat up two other deputies, and the deputies who delivered the beating all worked on the same floor in the sheriff department's main jail.
It's called the 3000 floor, and I heard word that, before the fight broke out, when they were exchanging words, these guys were throwing three-finger hand signs, similar to gang signs. There were rumors that they described themselves as the 3000 boys. So they were representing affiliation to a specific geographical area, the third floor of their jail. So in a lot of ways, they were like a gang.
Robert wondered if they're beating up their fellow deputies, how are they treating inmates? This turned out to be a very good question, and also just the beginning. Because the first thing Robert found out was, yes, most likely some of the deputies who beat up other deputies were using extraordinary amounts of force on inmates. But it wasn't just the guys at the Christmas party. Robert dug into public records about use of force reports in the jail, and later internal sheriff's department documents, these had never been made public, that showed that the department knew that brutality against inmates was a real problem in the jails, that deputies were beating inmates, fabricating stories to justify beatings, that investigations after the fact were shoddy. Robert was also hearing more and more from sources inside the sheriff's department. He published a series of stories with headlines like, LA County deputy says he was forced to beat mentally ill inmate, and Monitor says she saw deputies beat inmate, quote, like a punching bag. Robert talked to a former commander who said there were deputies who really did seem to have formed their own gangs in the jails.
I mean, this is a high-ranking guy. He told us that deputies were literally breaking inmates' bones to, in order to get membership into these gang-like groups of deputies, they had to break inmates' bones. And, I mean, that's the kind of thing that if I had heard before all of this started to unfold, I would never believe it. But this was a department commander telling us this. I mean, this guy was in charge of hundreds of deputies. He's someone who came up through the system, who has a lot of loyalty to the system.
At the same time that Robert was digging all of this up, another organization was also looking into the jails. Not a news organization, the FBI.
The date is August 30th, 2010 at 9:45 a.m. This is Special Agent Leah Marks. I will soon begin a consensual recording with target William David Corson Jr. at Lazy Daisy Cafe in Los Angeles.
Leah Marks was the lead FBI investigator looking into inmate abuse at the LA jails. Just to clarify, when she says consensual recording, that's FBI speak. It means she's consenting. The other guy doesn't know she's recording. Marks had been going out to the main jail in downtown LA for a while, investigating corruption and brutality by deputies against inmates. But the sheriff's department had no idea that's what she was looking into. FBI agents go to jails all the time to meet with informants. Agent Marks told one deputy at the jail she was working on a human trafficking case. This particular recording at the Lazy Daisy Cafe came about because one of the deputies, Deputy William Corson, asked Agent Marks out. He had a crush on her. She turned him down. But later she talked with her supervisor, and they decided that Deputy Corson could be a good source of intel. Marks told Corson she would go out with him, but just as friends, no dating. She wasn't interested. So they go out to breakfast. She has French toast, he has eggs, and she's asking him about his job. So he's telling her about violence in the jail, inmates beating up other inmates. Corson says in some cases, they're going to get beat down by their own people, more than likely worse than what we would normally do to them, which is bad because we send them to the hospital.
They're going to get beat down by their own people, more than likely worse than what we would normally do to them, which is bad because we send them to the hospital.
Like, why though?
Why what?
Why would you get sent to the hospital?
Because every time they fight with us, it's like an unwritten rule. They go to the hospital.
He's saying every time they fight with us, it's like an unwritten rule. They go to the hospital. He says sometimes they don't even have to make the first move. If we just perceive that they want to fight, we don't have to wait for them to hit us. Marks keeps asking, but is this how you're trained officially by the sheriff's department? That you're legally allowed to beat someone to the point that they go to the hospital if you even think they might do something? Corson says that it all depends on how the deputies write up the incident in their report.
As long as you don't quit fighting, that's where you bring it.
Got it.
They go back and forth like this, law enforcement officer to law enforcement officer, talking shop. Corson says they've gotten new rules for how long to taser someone. What they want you to do now is hold the taser, hold the trigger, until you actually get them handcuffed.
So what they want you to do now is hold the taser, hold the trigger until you actually get handcuffed. You won't get shot.
That can be a long time, says Marks. Corson says, oh yeah, depends on how clumsy we are.
Oh yeah. Depends how clumsy we are.
Wow.
I didn't even think about it before I salted them, but tomato? Would you like a tomato?
No. Good thing. Tomato and French toast, not exactly.
Probably not, but I like tomatoes.
Interesting. So, like, how do you guys get to the point where, like, you learn all the unwritten rules?
She says, so how do you guys get to the point where you learn all the unwritten rules? About sending them to the hospital, Corson says? I think just like in general, Mark says.
Because, like for us?
The hospital?
I mean, just like in general.
They tell us, he says. He explains that he learned the unwritten rules while he was still at the academy, just after graduating, during a training called jail ops, jail operations. He says, after we graduate, you go through, I think it's a week or 2-week course of jail ops. During that time, that's when they tell you it's an unwritten rule that any inmate that fights with deputies goes to the hospital.
During that time, that's when they tell you it's an unwritten rule that any inmate that fights with deputies goes to the hospital.
Got it. Even if it's not necessary, you just teach them a lesson, or what? Like,
Mark says, got it. Even if it's not necessary, you do it. You just teach them a lesson. Corson says, pretty much. Corson said later he doesn't like some of what he sees going on at the jail. He says about the inmates, some of them I like. From what I know of them, they're decent people. But kind of like what we said before, the only thing that separated me and them is one mistake. Robert, the LA Times guy who reported on the Christmas party fight, eventually heard about the FBI's investigation into the jails. Not from the FBI, but as a series of rumors going around.
We started to hear that the FBI had smuggled a cell phone to an inmate who was secretly acting as an informant.
This was the informant working with FBI agent Leah Marks, telling her about abuse in the jail. The phone was so that the informant could try and take pictures or video to back up inmate stories about brutality and corruption by some of the deputies. But there was a problem with this plan, which is cell phones are illegal in jail. And pretty quickly, deputies found the informant's cell phone during a routine search. LA Times headline, FBI paid deputy to smuggle cell phone in jail sting. Deputies found the phone wrapped in a glove and hidden inside a potato chip bag. And wow, was the sheriff's department mad that the FBI had done this. The sheriffs and the FBI were used to being more or less on the same side. Here's Robert.
They work with each other on a ton of task forces.
Right.
They have a close relationship, and this is the kind of thing that would be seen as a huge betrayal.
All right, here comes the sheriff. He's right here. Sheriff Lee Baca is with us.
he just called you Sheriff Steve.
You're here to talk about something near and dear that you're involved in.
This is the morning show on the local Fox TV affiliate in LA. Sheriff Lee Baca, who is in charge of the entire LA County Sheriff's Department, is sitting there with the hosts. This is right after Robert's first story in the LA Times about the smuggled cell phone. Baca's tone is measured as he answers the interviewer's questions, but it's clear he's really angry.
Do you resent the FBI's intrusion?
Oh, yeah.
And specifically this issue about a cell phone.
Right.
What can you tell us about that?
Well, it's illegal. It's a misdemeanor, and then there's a conspiracy law that goes along with it. The truth is, the sheriff runs the jail, and the sheriff's responsibilities have to be respected.
The sheriff was publicly saying, the feds have committed a crime. We police ourselves. Mind your own business. We've got this. And the feds, they were absolutely infuriated that the sheriff of LA County was publicly accusing them of a crime.
Of course, the FBI did do something illegal. Not only did they give their informant a cell phone in jail, but they also bribed a corrupt deputy with $1,500 to smuggle in that phone. But the FBI is not regular people. Different rules apply to them. The smuggled phone, although illegal, was part of an authorized FBI investigation into other illegal activity, abuse by deputies. And that's exactly the kind of trade-off that the FBI is allowed to make in some situations. They're legally permitted to let their informants commit certain crimes, though never a violent crime. But the sheriff's department was not backing down. On the contrary, they counterpunched, saying to the FBI essentially, "You're coming after us, we're coming after you."
Testing. Do a tape rolling.
On the same day that Sheriff Lee Baca went on TV, the Sheriff's Department sent 2 of its sergeants to FBI agent Leah Marks's home. They recorded the whole encounter. They waited outside her apartment, and one of the sheriff's officials, Sergeant Scott Craig, spots FBI agent Leah Marks and calls out to her.
Hi, Leah Marks. Leah?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Craig from the Sheriff's Department. I left you a message a couple weeks ago. We're here to talk to you. Did you get my message? Okay, so you don't want to talk to us? Do you want my card or anything?
Yes, I would, please, actually.
You know that you're a named suspect in a felony complaint?
It's hard to hear this part, but Sergeant Craig is saying, "Do you know that you're a named suspect in a felony complaint?" In other words, they showed up at her home not to say, "We're arresting you," but to say, "We might be about to arrest you." No matter what FBI agent Mark says, Sergeant Craig keeps telling her, "We might be about to arrest you."
Okay, what I'm going to do for you now is I'm in the process of swearing out a declaration for an arrest warrant for you. Would you like us to go through?
I would prefer that you would actually contact the assistant director in charge of the FBI.
Okay, well, what we're going to do to arrange for your arrest when we're ready to do that, we can either do it.
No, you need to contact the FBI.
They basically say that they're going to issue a warrant for her arrest and that they're investigating her for the crime of smuggling a cell phone into the jail. And, she basically says, talk to my boss. And then, we have a recording of this. Her boss calls, these sheriff's investigators.
Okay, go ahead. This is Sergeant Maricela Long from the Sheriff's Department. She had been with Sergeant Craig outside FBI agent Leah Marks' house. Sergeant Long recorded this call with the FBI.
So you're with who, sir?
You guys indicated she was given a warrant for her arrest?
There's going to be.
Does the sheriff know this?
The sheriff knows it, sir.
Okay. Can I ask what the charges are going to be?
Okay. You're going to have to speak to the undersheriff.
Sergeant Long gives the phone number from the undersheriff, and then they wrap up the call.
You're not going to give the warrant to the do you?
It could be tomorrow, sir. You're going to have to talk to the undersheriff.
Okay. Thank you.
And at the end of the recording, after they say goodbye to each other, they forget to stop recording, the sheriff's investigators do, and one of the investigators basically kind of jubilantly goes, "They're scared!"
They're scared. They're like, "Do you know when is the warrant being issued?"
And her colleague says, "You're still rolling," and the tape ends. But it spoke to their frame of mind. I mean,
they're scared, meaning we scared the FBI. Like, yay.
Yeah, she sounded really pleased that the FBI had been spooked by them showing up at this agent's door.
So what started as an investigation into serious inmate abuse was now being overshadowed by an institutional-sized shoving match between the feds and the LA Sheriff's Department. And the next big shove in that match was a pretty dramatic one. The feds accusing sheriff's officials of obstruction of justice, intentionally thwarting a federal investigation. And you could argue that the feds had the beginnings of a case. The sheriff's agents who went to see Marks, the feds could paint that as intimidation. The sheriff's department gloating at the end of the phone call with the FBI, the feds could argue it showed intent. And then there was this. Remember the informant, the guy the FBI had smuggled the cell phone to? Almost as soon as his cover was blown, the feds couldn't find him. They demanded that the sheriff's department let them meet with their informant. And the sheriff's department, I'll let Robert, the LA Times reporter, tell it.
I mean, I started to get calls from sources, and they were telling me various versions of this tale that, the inmate who'd been secretly working as an informant for the FBI was being moved around the jails. And all of this was done in an effort to hide him from the FBI.
Moved around? You mean physically moved?
Sure, yeah. So what you've got to understand is that this, LA County and the LA County jail system is so massive. It's not just one jail downtown or two jails. There are jails downtown, then there are jails spread across the county, holding cells inside of stations. And so they were moving him from one floor to another, from one facility to another, and this is the largest jail system in the country. So there are dozens of places you could put an inmate if you don't want him to be found. And my initial response to hearing such wild stories is, skepticism. I mean, I just couldn't believe that you would literally hide a human being and, ignore requests from the FBI. It seemed too unbelievable to me.
So Robert started asking around, trying to find this mystery informant. But it seemed like a lost cause. He didn't even know the guy's name.
So one Friday evening, I was leaving, and on my way out, I checked my mail. I went to my mailbox and I grabbed the letters that had come in. And at this point, we'd been writing about inmate abuse for a while, and I didn't know it before, but what happens when you write about inmate abuse and when you write about jails is you start getting letters from prisoners everywhere, not just in LA County, across the state, and they're all trying to tell you about their own experience being abused, their own experience being wrongly convicted, and some of them are probably true, but again, what happens in jails is really hard to prove, and we're so busy that I'm not proud of this, but I wouldn't always read these letters closely. And so one of these letters had come in, and I was sort of just reading it while walking out, and the guy was saying, I'm the FBI's informant. I'm the guy who was at the center of all this.
So wait, you were looking for him, and as you were looking for him, you got a letter from him?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I thought, at that point, the chances of me finding him, I didn't think it would be possible, and then comes this letter, and he's describing exactly the rumor that I'd been hearing, that he had been moved around, that they had changed his name.
The guy's name was Anthony Brown, and he had been transferred to prison by this point, so he was out of the jail system. And Robert and his reporting partner, Jack Leonard, went down to see him.
All I knew about him at that point was that he was this convicted bank robber facing, I forget what his sentence was, like 323 years in prison or something.
Yeah, hundreds of years.
And I was expecting this big, tough, scary-looking guy, and in walks Anthony Brown, and, he's this, pudgy, sweet guy who's, got, these glasses and this, really charming New York accent. When you're just thinking about what a bank robber looks like, you're not imagining Anthony Brown.
Anthony Brown told him a lot. He confirmed that, yes, the cell phone had been smuggled in by a deputy who was bribed with $1,500. Yes, Anthony Brown was moved around the jails. He was hidden inside the jail system by deputies who guarded him 24 hours a day and rebooked him under aliases that would change every 48 hours. Brown also told Robert and Jack that he had seen a lot of abuse of inmates by deputies. He said he kept notes. His description of daily life in the jail was in line with what Robert and Jack had already reported out through documents and sources. But Brown said a lot of other stuff that just did not seem to be true. He told Robert and Jack that he'd been a high-level executive at Def Jam Recordings. Def Jam said they'd never heard of him. He told Robert and Jack that he'd made a ton of money being on tour with Beyonce. Couldn't nail that down. And there were other things. So, as a witness in a case about inmate abuse, if it was just Brown testifying about what he'd seen, no evidence to back up his claims, that would be a hard sell. But for an obstruction case, Brown told Robert and Jack one story that ended up being very important and that other people could corroborate.
You know, immediately after his cover was blown, before they were able to, really get the operation to move him and change his name, and, his FBI handler had gotten into the jail to interview because they had gotten word that his cover was blown. And they're in this room, and they're meeting, and they're talking, and, a couple sheriff's officials barge in and declare this meeting is over. They kick him out. They kick the agent out. That was really interesting. It showed an explicit effort to get in the way of a conversation between an FBI agent and an informant. And, that was one of the main arguments that the sheriff's department, tried to obstruct the federal investigation, which is a crime.
That incident was cited as a main evidence.
Yeah, that incident was cited. That was a federal interview, and they came in and they basically shut it down. They kicked the agent out.
The sheriff's department said yes, they had interrupted the FBI's meeting with Brown, but to protect him, according to a newly heightened security protocol. In fact, they said none of what had happened was intentional obstruction of justice. They said they'd moved Anthony Brown around the jails and hidden him, not to keep him away from the feds, but to keep him safe from possible retribution by the deputies he was informing on. So far, jurors have not bought these arguments. Toward the end of 2013, the feds brought obstruction of justice cases against 7 people in the LA County Sheriff's Department. 6 have been convicted, including the 2 sergeants who went to FBI agent Leah Marks's home. One more case ended with a hung jury. It's going to be retried. But Robert, the LA Times reporter, said even before these convictions, even before anyone was charged in these obstruction cases, the sheriff's department was coming under more pressure than it ever had to deal with brutality against inmates by deputies. The FBI investigation came on top of a whole pile of complaints and evidence that had been building up for years, from civilian monitors of police, from the ACLU, from media reports. Facing all that, the sheriff implemented reforms. And now, Robert says, from everything he hears from people on the inside, though there's still problems in the jails, the inmates are treated differently. A few months ago, Sheriff Lee Baca, who'd headed the department for 15 years, resigned. One last fact to chew on. The sheriff's department plan to hide Anthony Brown in the jail system was called Operation Pandora's Box. I didn't quite do a double take when I read that, but I did think it wasn't the best myth to choose. The story doesn't end well for anyone who's hoping to contain something or keep it hidden. Pandora opens the box, and the contents fly out for the whole world to see.
Nancy Updike is one of the producers of our program. Robert Federecci is a reporter at the Los Angeles Times who's covered law enforcement since 2010. We contacted the LA County Sheriff's Department about the recent history of violence against inmates in the jails, and they sent this statement, quote, "Over the past few years, the department has made a multitude of changes which have transformed the custody environment. Some of these changes include innovative ideas which have not previously been implemented in large jail systems. Use of force incidents have dropped significantly in comparison to 2011. Mind your business. Mind your business. Our program was produced today by Nikki Meek, with Alex Bloomberg, Ben Cahoon, Sean Cole, Stephanie Fu, Hannah Jonathan Waltzer, Koenig, Jonathan Mankibar, Brian Reed, Robin Simeon, Alyssa Shipp, and Nancy Updike. Our senior producer is Julie Snyder. Production up from Allison Davis and J.P. Dukes. It is Allison's last program with us here as our visiting fellow, and we all wish her the best. Seth Lind is our operations director. Emily Condon's our production manager. Elise Ferguson's our administrative assistant. Adrian Mathewitz runs our website. Research help from Michelle Harris and Julie Beer. Music help from Damian Gray from Rob Geddes. Special thanks today to Alan Sorembo, David Siegel, Alexandra Natapoff, Jason Gonzalez, Laurie Levinson, Amanda Hess, and Slate, and the Double X podcast, where we first heard about the cheerleader handbooks. Audio of Studs Terkel's old radio show was provided by WFMT and the Chicago Historical Society. Studs' old archives are online. There are all kinds of interviews there. James Baldwin, Buster Keaton, Muhammad Ali, Zerina Stell, Nelson Algren, Fellini, many, many more. You can hear them all for free. StudsTerkel.org. Our website, thisamericanlife.org. This American Life is delivered to public radio stations by PRX, the Public Radio Exchange. Support for This American Life comes from the car company Scion. For over 10 years, Scion has been helping others follow their passions. Last year, their Motivate program helped 50 creative entrepreneurs take their businesses to the next level with workshops and mentoring. Learn more about Motivate at Scion.com. And from Simple, rethinking the online banking experience from the ground up with no surprise fees and Portland, Oregon-based customer service. Simple believes that people should know exactly what's going on with their money. Learn more at simple.com/American. Simple, the way banking should be. And from Lagunitas Brewing Company, committed to keeping the pub in public radio. We're offering curious ales and lagers for those who appreciate hearing and telling great stories. Learn more at Lagunitas.com. Thanks as always to our program's co-founder, Mr. Troy Malatia. You know, I got a frantic call from him today. He had a big decision he needed help with.
Do I or don't I want to put on stilettos and a bikini and be in that music video?
I'm Ira Glass. Back next week. More stories of This American Life.
Mind your own business, leave your neighbors alone. Mind your own business. Show backbiting, trying to break a folks home now. Mind your own business. Don't try to sell me nothing about yourself, oh now. Mind your own business. You're running your mouth, you're about to worry me to death. Mind your own business. Girl, close the door. Keep your big mouth shut. But I don't like it, so don't press your love. Why don't you now?
Thank you for joining us today on KCFR FM Denver and KCFC Boulder, HD at 90.1 FM, and online at CPR.org, Colorado Public Radio News.
Support for Colorado Public Radio comes from the Colorado Health Foundation Symposium, engaging discussion of health and healthcare, streaming live July 23 to 25. Register and watch online at coloradohealth.org/live.
I'm Michelle Bergen. I'm the owner of Media Visions, which is a comprehensive media planning and buying agency here in Denver. I've recommended and purchased CPR underwriting for several of my clients, as well as for my company, because I believe in the quality, loyalty, and power of the CPR audience. People tend to listen to the station multiple times every week, and so we're able to build frequency very effectively, and I've seen the underwriting work well for my clients. Find out if underwriting is the right thing for your business at CPR.org.